That train whistle hollered all through the valley, and a young woman named Annabelle Porter held on tight to her one and only suitcase. Her knuckles were bone white, pressed hard against that old, worn-out leather. My daddy would be turning in his grave, she thought, if he knew I was fixing to become some stranger's mail-order bride. She whispered those words just to herself, and they vanished right into the thick steam that was swirling all around the platform in Silver Creek Station, Colorado, back in 1878. Now that little newspaper ad had seemed like a godsend just 3 short months ago, back when she was in such a terrible bind in Boston. Her father had just been laid to rest, and the bill collectors were circling just like a bunch of hungry buzzards. A respectable rancher, it said, was looking for an educated lady from back east for the purpose of marriage and good old-fashioned companionship. Her passage would be paid. Those few simple words were her one and only ticket out, her only escape from a life of pure poverty, even if it led her down a path she never ever would have dreamed of for herself. Annabelle took a deep breath and smoothed down her navy blue traveling dress. It was the finest thing she owned. She tried her best to look brave as all the other folks started stepping off the train all around her. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for a man holding a sign with her name on it. But then, a sudden ruckus over by the station house pulled her attention away. "I do not give a hoot what your little book says," a deep voice thundered. "Those cattle were promised for yesterday's train. My boys have been waiting out there since sunup." The station master, a small fellow with spectacles sitting on the end of his nose, backed away from the towering man standing before him. "Mr. Knox, I understand you're frustrated, but this here telegram clearly states—" "That telegram just says what some fool up in Denver decided, not the deal we agreed upon." The tall man slammed his fist down on the counter, making several of the nearby ladies gasp and jump. Annabelle found she could not look away. The angry rancher stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a trim waist. His dark brown Stetson was pushed back on his head, showing a strong face tanned deep by the sun. Even though he was mad as a hornet, there was something powerful about him, a kind of raw energy that seemed to take over the very air in the room. "Is that Mr. Harrington?" Annabelle asked a woman standing nearby, referring to the man she was meant to marry. The woman gave a little laugh. "Honey, that there is Kieran Knox. He owns the biggest spread in the whole county. He is not exactly the type for polite conversation, as you can tell." Annabelle gave a little nod to show her thanks and went right back to searching the platform. After about 15 minutes, that hope she had started to dwindle. The platform was getting mighty empty, and still not a single soul had come up to her. She sat right down on her suitcase, trying her best to ignore the growing knot in the pit of her stomach. "Miss Porter." She lifted her head and saw a young boy who looked to be about 12 years old, his freckled face partly hidden under a hat that was way too big for him. "Yes, that's me," she answered, and you could hear the relief flood into her voice. "Mr. Harrington sent me to come and get you." The young fellow was wringing his hands nervously. "My name is Tobias. I work down at the general store. Mr. Harrington wants you to meet him over there." Annabelle's brow furrowed. Now this was not the kind of welcome she had been expecting at all. "I see. Well, you lead the way then, Tobias." The boy snatched up her suitcase before she could even say a word and started heading toward the center of town. As they made their way, Annabelle got her first good look at Silver Creek. The main street was wide and dusty, lined on both sides with those buildings with the tall, false fronts. She saw men in cowboy hats and women wearing simple calico dresses, all moving like they had somewhere important to be. It was a whole different world from what she knew back in Boston. Cobblestone streets and sturdy brick townhouses that lined the main road. "Is it much further to Mr. Harrington's ranch?" she asked, hoping to break the quiet ride. Tobias gave her a strange look. "About 3 miles outside of town, ma'am," he said slowly. The general store sat right in the center of town, its big glass windows showing off everything from leather boots to colorful bolts of fabric. As they walked in, a little bell chimed above their heads. A thin man with a hairline that had seen better days looked up from behind the counter. "Well now, you must be Miss Porter." He came around, wiping his hands on his apron. "I am Gerald Harrington, and I welcome you to Silver Creek." Annabelle offered her hand, trying her best to school the surprise from her face. The man was at least 20 years older than she had pictured, looking much closer to 50 than to 30. His handshake was weak, and his palms were surprisingly soft. "Thank you for arranging my travel, Mr. Harrington. Your letters were so very kind." But Gerald's smile was all wrong. It didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, well, about that, it seems there has been a slight change of plans. You see, my sister, she arrived unexpectedly all the way from St. Louis last month. She's staying on with me now, keeping the house and all that." Annabelle felt her stomach plummet. "I am afraid I do not understand what you mean." "What I'm trying to say, Miss Porter, is that my situation has changed a little. I no longer find myself in need of a wife." He at least had the decency to look a little bit embarrassed. "I've already gone and set you up with a room at the boarding house for tonight. Come morning, you can catch that train right back east. I'll handle the cost of the ticket, of course." All the color just drained right out of Annabelle's face. "But I sold every last thing I owned to come here. I have absolutely nowhere to go back to." Gerald just shrugged his shoulders, looking mighty uncomfortable. "I am sorry for your predicament, Miss Porter, but a man has to do what is best for his own kin. My sister needs my help more than I need a wife right now. You put out an advertisement for a bride. I answered it with an honest heart. We wrote letters for months on end." Annabelle fought hard to keep her voice from shaking. "And now I am offering you a ticket home, free of charge. A lot of men would consider that quite generous." His voice turned cold. "Tobias, go on and take Miss Porter's bag over to Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house." Annabelle stood there, frozen solid, as Gerald turned right back to his account book, dismissing her as easily as if she were just some door-to-door salesman. The shame of it all burned hotter than the panic rising up in her chest. Mr. Harrington," she tried again, but the little bell over the door chimed as it swung open right behind her. "Harrington, I need 20 pounds of nails and a new pair of wire cutters. The set you sold me last month are already rusted clear through." That deep voice just stopped on a dime. Annabelle turned around and saw the rancher from the train station, pretty much filling the whole doorway. His big frame was blocking out all the afternoon sun. Now up close, she could see that his eyes were the kind of startling blue that grabs you, especially set against his suntanned skin. "Pardon me, I did not mean to cut in," he said, his eyes moving between Annabelle and Gerald. Gerald's whole face lit up. You could tell he was glad for the interruption. "Not a bit, Knox. We were just about finished up here. Let me get your things together for you." But Kieran Knox's eyes stayed on Annabelle's face for a moment, seeing her red cheeks and the fire in her eyes. "Is everything okay with you, ma'am?" he asked. "Everything is just fine," she answered, a little too stiffly. She was not about to air her troubles in front of a complete stranger. Gerald rushed from behind the counter. "Miss Porter was just on her way out. She has a room at the boarding house for the night before she heads back east come morning." The look on Kieran's face seemed to shift, changed. "You must be Porter, the mail-order bride." Annabelle flinched at his cold, blunt words. "I was under the impression—" "Yes." Kieran turned his hard gaze on Gerald. His jaw was set tight. "You are really just sending her back?" Gerald made a show of gathering some loose nails. "My sister arrived, as you know. I reckon I do not need a wife now. So you just let this poor woman travel all this way?" "Where are you from, ma'am, Miss Porter?" "Boston," she answered quietly. "All the way from Boston only for you to turn her around after she sold every last thing she owned based on a promise you made." Gerald's face turned beet red. "This is not your concern, Knox." "Well, it becomes my concern. When a man in my town acts without a lick of honor," Kieran's voice was low, but it had a steel edge to it. "This woman came out here in good faith, and I am sending her back in good faith with a first-class ticket." Gerald's voice had turned whiny and weak. Kieran looked over at Annabelle again. He really looked at her this time, taking in her fine dress, her educated way of speaking, and the proud way she held her head up, despite being in such a terrible predicament. "Miss Porter," he said out of the blue, "are you still interested in becoming a wife, Silver Creek?" Annabelle blinked, a little taken aback. "That was my whole reason for coming out here." "I know," he said. "Well then, I'd like to offer you something else. Something other than just heading straight back east." He took off his hat, showing a full head of thick, dark hair. You see, my housekeeper had to leave about 2 weeks ago. Her mother took ill, and she went to care for her. My ranch is in real need of someone to run the household, and I am offering that very position to you. It pays a fair wage, and the job is yours for 3 months. Now, if after that time is up, you still wish to go back east, I will pay your fare myself, but if you decide to stay on here in Silver Creek, well, you will have had plenty of time to meet other folks, other potential gentlemen, if you take my meaning. Annabelle just stared at the man, trying to find a hint of a trick in his eyes, but all she saw was plain, simple honesty. Are you saying you would actually hire me as your housekeeper without any references to my name? Not a single one? Well, you were good enough to be Harrington's wife, and he never even laid eyes on you. I reckon that is all the reference a person needs for keeping a house. A small smile played on his lips. Besides all that, I like to think I am a good judge of character, Miss Porter. And you strike me as the kind of woman who does not back down from a fight. Gerald could hardly speak. Now, just a minute, Knox. I do believe Miss Porter is perfectly capable of making her own decisions, Kieran said, not even bothering to look at him. Well, what do you say, miss? Annabelle's mind was spinning. This offer came right out of the blue, but it was a welcome one, to be sure. It would give her a moment to catch her breath, to think about her next move, and to learn about this town before she committed to anything. And this man, while he was a bit imposing, had just stood up for her when not another soul would. I accept your offer, Mr. Knox, she said, her voice now firm. Though I ought to warn you, my cooking is really just the simple basics. A wide grin spread across his face, completely transforming his stern features. We will not starve, Miss Porter. The important thing is that you will get a fair shake here. He then turned to the boy, who had been watching the whole exchange with wide eyes. Tobias, go on and take Miss Porter's eyeing over to my wagon now. Well, Gerald's face had turned a troubling shade of purple. You cannot just do that. I reckon I just did, Kieran said, calm as you please, settling his hat back on his head. Now, about those nails I came in for, Harrington. As Gerald grudgingly began to fill Kieran's order, Annabelle stood a little straighter, her chin lifting up. This surely was not how she had pictured her arrival in Silver Creek, but maybe, just maybe, it was a blessing in disguise after all. If nothing else, she had a good 3 months to show what she was made of, and not as some fellow's mail-order bride, but as her own woman. When they stepped back outside, Kieran gave her a steady, gentle hand up into his wagon. As they started to pull away from the general store, Annabelle noticed folks watching them with plain old curiosity. Oh, they'll talk, Kieran said, following her gaze. In a small town, they always do. What do you reckon they'll say? She asked. He glanced over at her, his blue eyes crinkling up at the corners. They're going to say Kieran Knox just went and claimed Gerald Harrington's mail-order bride for himself. Then his expression turned serious. But I want you to know, Miss Porter, that as long as you're under my roof, you will be treated with nothing but complete respect. I believe you, she said, surprised that it was the honest truth. And please call me Annabelle. Annabelle, he repeated, and the name sounded brand new in his deep voice. Well then, welcome to Silver Creek. As the wagon rolled clear of town toward the wide, open country, Annabelle felt something she hadn't counted on, a little flicker of real hope. Perhaps her new life out west wasn't going to be what she had planned at all. But maybe, just maybe, this was the fresh start she needed. The Knox Ranch seemed to stretch out forever, covering more land than Annabelle had ever thought possible. As they came over the crest of a hill, she let out a soft gasp at the sight of the main house. It was a big, solid 2-story home, built right and strong from thick logs, with a wide porch that wrapped all the way around the front. A handful of outbuildings were scattered across the property, and way out in the distance, a massive red barn stood watch over a corral brimming with horses. It is absolutely beautiful, she said, her voice filled with wonder. The hard set of Kieran's jaw seemed to soften with a powerful sense of pride. My daddy started with not a thing but 100 acres and a dream. When he passed on 5 years back, he left me 5,000 acres in the finest cattle bloodlines in all of Colorado. He clicked the reins, guiding the wagon up toward the house. It is a good life, but it surely asks a lot of you. How many folks do you have working here? Well, I keep 8 full-time hands, plus my foreman, a good man named Jacob Miller. During roundup and branding season, we hire on some extra help. He then pulled the wagon to a gentle stop. The house has been a little let go ever since Mrs. Finch took off. Annabelle had to hide a small smile at how awkward he suddenly seemed. Well, I am not afraid of... That was some hard work, Mr. Knox. Call me Kieran, he corrected, hopping down from the wagon. He came right around to give her a hand. His strong hands circled her waist as he lifted her. He set her on the ground like she weighed nothing at all. For a moment, they stood so close together. She could smell the worn leather and sun-baked cotton of his shirt. It was a good, honest smell. Then he finally stepped back, clearing his throat a little awkwardly. I will show you inside, he said, reaching down to grab her traveling bag. The inside of the house was surprisingly spacious, but it had all the telltale signs of a bachelor's place. Dishes were piled high and scattered in the kitchen sink. A pair of muddy boots had been kicked off right by the door, and a thin coat of dust settled on most of the surfaces. Your room is going to be upstairs. The first door on the right, Kieran explained, leading the way up a fine, broad staircase. My room is down at the very end of the hall. The other rooms are just empty for now, though every now and then Jacob stays over if we are working on something late into the night. The bedroom he showed her into was a pleasant surprise, much larger than she'd imagined, with a 4-poster bed, a solid chest of drawers, and a small writing desk right underneath a window that looked out over the mountains to the west. The bed linens, while a bit rumpled, looked clean. It was spotless. I'll let you get settled in, Kieran said, his voice a low rumble, as he placed her old suitcase on the bed. Nipper's usually around 6 o'clock, but with everything that's happened, don't you worry your head about cooking tonight. I can rustle something up myself. Oh, heavens no, Annabelle insisted, pulling off her hat and dusty gloves. I'll need to get acquainted with that kitchen sooner or later. Just give me about 30 minutes to freshen up a bit. A flicker of respect showed in his eyes. All right then, suit yourself. I'll be out in the barn if you need anything at all. The moment he was gone, Annabelle sank onto the quilt, the weight of the whole long day finally crashing down on her. She'd shown up here expecting to be a bride by sundown, and instead she'd found herself hired on as a housekeeper for one of the most formidable men she had ever laid eyes on. But still, there was something about that Kieran Knox that made her feel safe, despite how rough he was around the edges. She unpacked the few things she owned, changed into a simple cotton dress, and tied a clean apron snugly around her waist. Determined to prove her worth right away, she marched herself right into the kitchen to see exactly what she was working with. Well, what do you know, the pantry was surprisingly full, stocked with all the basics like flour, sugar, coffee, and beans, and plenty of canned goods. She found potatoes, onions, and even a few carrots down in a little root cellar, hidden under a trap door in the kitchen floor. A small smokehouse just behind the kitchen was holding several hams and some nice sides of bacon. So by the time Kieran walked back in, Annabelle had a simple but hearty meal already: fried ham, potatoes, and fresh-made biscuits. She had also managed to clean the kitchen until it was shining. Kieran just stopped right there in the doorway, a look of pure, pleasant surprise on his face. He said, "It smells just like my mother's kitchen in here." Well, I certainly hope that's a compliment, Annabelle replied, as she put the last of the warm biscuits into a basket lined with a clean cloth. The highest one there is, he assured her, walking over to wash his hands at the old pump sink. She was the best cook he'd come across in 3 counties. They ate their meal at the large kitchen table, and the quiet between them was a bit awkward at first, but it slowly settled into something much more comfortable. Kieran ate with the genuine appreciation of a man who was used to his own cooking, which Annabelle couldn't help but take as a compliment. So, tell me about Boston, he asked just as they were finishing up their supper. Annabelle began to describe her life back in the city, her father's important job as a professor. She told him about the books, their small but cozy home, and the libraries and concerts she used to love. She didn't spend much time on the financial troubles that came right after her father passed away. But Kieran seemed to hear the words that she wasn't saying out loud. So what made you decide to answer Harrington's advertisement? He asked, his blue eyes looking right at her. She thought about changing the subject, but figured the plain truth was best. It was mostly out of necessity, but I also wanted something new. My life back in Boston was all laid out for me. As a professor's daughter, I was expected to marry another professor, or maybe some fancy lawyer. After my father was gone, I realized how little I had ever decided for myself. She looked him straight in the eye. Coming out west was my choice, even if the reasons for it were not what I would have wanted. Kieran nodded his head slowly. The West is a good place for starting over. Most folks out here don't much care where you came from. They only care what you make of yourself right now. And what about you? She asked. Have you always been a rancher? A dark look crossed his face. I was gone for a while. I fought in the war when I was barely 18. I saw things no boy should ever have to see. His voice kind of trailed off for a moment. He came back a different man, like we all did. But the ranch, it was still here, and this land, well, it has a powerful way of healing a man's soul. Annabelle realized he was sharing a piece of his heart, something private and heavy, a gift of trust she sure wasn't expecting to get so soon. I'm so sorry for everything you went through, she said, her voice soft as cotton. He just gave a little shrug, and that vulnerable look vanished right back behind that tough cowboy wall of his. That was a lifetime ago. He pushed his chair back and stood, gathering up their empty plates. I generally make a quick round of the property before I turn in for the night. You gonna be all right here by yourself? Oh, of course. I've got plenty here to keep me busy for a while. She motioned toward the kitchen, which still looked like it needed a whole lot of elbow grease. Don't you burn the midnight oil, he told her. Dawn gets here mighty early on a ranch. After he walked out, Annabelle went right back to it, finishing up the kitchen and making little notes of all the things that needed fixing in the next few days. It was a big old house, but she figured she could tackle it, one room at a time. She was just about to call it a night when a sudden knock on the back door nearly made her jump out of her skin. A man in his middle years, with hair going gray at the temples, stood there on the porch, holding his hat in his hands. Evening, ma'am. My name's Jacob Miller. I'm the foreman around here. Right here. I'm Annabelle Porter, she introduced herself. Please come on in, Mr. Miller. He stepped inside, his face weathered by the sun, his expression curious but kind. The boss told me about the situation back in town. I wanted to make sure you were settling in all right. His concern truly touched her. Well, that is very thoughtful of you. I am doing just fine, thank you. The foreman nodded, clearly sizing her up. Mrs. Finch was with the boss for a solid 15 years. She left some mighty big shoes to fill. I understand. I do not intend to try and replace her. I am merely here to help out for a while. Something about her honest answer seemed to sit well with him. That is good to hear. A ranch this size needs a woman's touch, but it also needs someone who understands the way we do things here. He motioned to the door. If you need anything at all, my cabin is just on the other side of the bunkhouse. The boys, they will not bother you one bit. Kieran runs a tight ship, but you just holler if you have any trouble. After he left, Annabelle made her way on him up the stairs, feeling tired down to her bones, but strangely at peace. Through her bedroom window, she could see Kieran's tall figure moving across the yard, a lantern in his hand, checking on his land before turning in for the night. There was something so steady and reassuring about his presence, his watchfulness, his unwavering commitment to his duties. As she got herself ready for bed, Annabelle realized that for the very first time since her daddy passed on, she finally felt safe. The day sure had not gone the way she had planned, not even close. But maybe Providence had a different path in mind for her all along. With that comforting thought, she drifted off into a deep and peaceful sleep. The next few days settled into a sturdy rhythm of life at the Knox Ranch. Annabelle was up before the sun to get breakfast ready for Kieran and any of the ranch hands who happened to be working close by. The men ate like they were starved. Their appreciation for her cooking was plain to see in their empty plates and quiet words of thanks. After they all headed out for the day's hard work, she turned her attention back to the house. One room at a time, she tackled the dust and clutter, slowly uncovering a home that had clearly once been cared for with a whole lot of love. Underneath all that neglect, she found good, solid furniture, old family pictures, and all the little things that told the story of the woman who had raised Kieran right there in that house. A handmade quilt in one corner, a collection of pressed wildflowers in another. Then on her fourth day there, while cleaning the study, She stumbled upon something, a bookshelf just packed with classic books, authors like Shakespeare, Dickens, Thoreau, and a whole lot of others. She was gently running her fingers along the leather spines when Kieran's voice made her jump. "That was my mother's collection," he said, standing in the doorway. "She used to teach at the local schoolhouse before she married my father." Annabelle turned a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice over in her hands. She sure had excellent taste. "I reckon she would have liked you," he said, and the words seemed to catch even him by surprise. He quickly changed the subject. "I just came to tell you I am riding out to the north pasture. I will not be back until well after dark. I will keep a plate warm for you," she promised with a small smile. He just nodded, hesitating like he had something else on his mind, but then he left, just touching the brim of his hat. As the days slowly turned into weeks, Annabelle found herself looking forward to these short little moments, these small glimpses of the real man hiding beneath that tough rancher's exterior. She started to see that he had a real dry sense of humor and a deep, quiet respect for the land, and a sense of justice that was solid as an oak tree. The ranch hands always talked about how fair he was as a boss and how he had a natural way with horses. Even the folks in town, on the rare days she went with him for supplies. And folks in town started treating him with a new kind of respect that went way beyond him just owning a big piece of land. By the end of her second week, that whole house was completely transformed. The windows sparkled, the floors just shined, and there were fresh-cut wildflowers brightening up all the tables. She had even taken on that neglected old garden, coaxing vegetables right out of the fertile soil with just a little daily attention. It was right there, kneeling down among the carrot tops, that Jacob came and found her one afternoon. "Miss Porter," he called out, walking up with a real sense of urgency in his step. "The boss needs you at the bunkhouse. One of the new hands got himself thrown pretty bad this morning. Busted his arm, and he's got a nasty gash right on his head." Annabelle was on her feet in a flash. "Did y'all send for the doctor?" she asked. "We sent Billy, but old Doc Watson is clear out at the Thompson place, helping deliver a baby. Could be hours yet." Back inside the main house, Annabelle moved fast. She gathered up her supplies, some clean linens and her little sewing kit, along with some whiskey for cleaning the wound, and a jar of honey to dress it with, which was a remedy her own grandmother had always sworn by. When she got to the bunkhouse, she found Kieran kneeling right beside a young fella laid out on a narrow bed, his face looking mighty pale beneath his tan. "Annabelle," Kieran called out, his voice filled with relief. "Thank goodness you are here. This fella is Alan Peterson. It is his first day on the Trinity, and the Bay gelding just did not take a liking to his way of doing things." She knelt right down beside the injured cowboy, taking a good look at the damage. His left arm was broken for sure, already swelling up something fierce against his rolled-up sleeve. The gash on his forehead had bled a whole lot, as head wounds tend to do, but it looked a lot worse than it probably was. "We have to get that cut cleaned and stitched, then set the arm," she said, sounding way calmer than she actually felt on the inside. She had helped the doctor who took care of her father during his final illness. But goodness, she had never faced injuries this bad all by herself. Kieran just nodded, his trust in her as clear as day. "You just tell me what to do." With his help, she began to clean the deep head wound, while Jacob held the young man as still as he could. The whiskey made Alan howl something awful when it touched the open cut. But Annabelle just kept on working, quick and steady. Her stitches were small and as even as you please. Setting the bone, well, that proved to be a lot more challenging. It required all of Kieran's strength to pull the arm out straight while she gently guided the bones back into place. By the time they had it all splinted up, using some wood splints and clean bandages, all four of them were beaded with sweat. "Looks like this is not your first rodeo," Kieran said, as they watched Alan finally drift into a deep, exhausted sleep, helped along by a good dose of medicine. "My grandma was a midwife," Annabelle explained. "She taught me a thing or two about healing." They walked back to the main house together, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows clear across the yard. "You are just full of surprises, Annabelle Porter," Kieran said, his voice filled with a warm admiration. "So are you," she replied. "I never would have expected a big rancher to have such a gentle touch with a man who is hurt. When you are responsible for other men's lives and You learn what needs learning. He stopped right at the porch steps, turning to face her. You have made a real difference out here already. The house, the men, why, even the garden is looking better than ever. His praise brought an unexpected flush to her cheeks. I am just doing what needs to be done. His blue eyes held hers and something unspoken passed between them. For a heartbeat, she thought he might just reach for her hand, but instead he simply cleared his throat and motioned to the door. You should get some rest. It's been a long old day. That night, Annabelle lay there wide awake, playing that moment on the porch over and over in her mind. The way Kieran had looked at her, not like she was some hired hand or even just a friend, but as a woman. It was a look that stirred up feelings she surely hadn't been expecting. Feelings that made her already tricky situation a whole lot more complicated. She had come all the way to Silver Creek expecting to become Gerald Harrington's wife, a sensible arrangement that was born of pure necessity. She had not, for 1 second, expected to find herself drawn to a man like Kieran Knox, a man whose very presence made her heart beat a little faster. Having such feelings was a dangerous thing when her future was so uncertain, especially when in less than 3 months, she would have to decide whether to put down roots in Silver Creek or pack her bags and return east. And yet, as the weeks rolled on by, Annabelle found it was getting harder and harder to keep her heart guarded. Kieran started asking her to join him on evening rides across the property, showing her all the hidden creeks and quiet meadows that were just bursting with wildflowers. They talked so easily about books, about his big plans for the ranch, and about her life back in Boston. She met his neighbors at the Sunday church services and found she was being welcomed with open arms. Most of the community, though Gerald Harrington pointedly avoided her, and his sister watched her with narrowed eyes. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Kieran mentioned a letter that had arrived that morning. Mrs. Finch won't be returning, he said. Her mother's health has worsened, and she's decided to stay in Missouri permanently. Annabelle nodded, unsurprised. You'll need to find a replacement, or keep the one I have. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. Your 3 months are happy to me, Annabelle, my though. Have you given thought to what comes after? The question hung between them, weighted with implications. I have, she admitted, but I'm not certain what my options truly are. You could stay on as housekeeper permanently, with increased wages, he hesitated, then added, or there might be other arrangements to consider. Her heart quickened. What sort of arrangements? Before he could answer, the sound of approaching hooves interrupted them. Jacob appeared on horseback. His face was all business. Boss, we've got ourselves a problem. Trouble. Some cattle have gone missing from the east pasture. Looks like at least 30 head. We found their tracks, and they're heading straight for Blackwater Canyon. Kieran shot up from his chair in a heartbeat. All the warmth from their earlier conversation was gone just like that. It had to be rustlers. He asked sharp like, how fresh are those tracks? Not more than a few hours old. They'll be moving real slow with that many head of cattle. Round up the men. We're riding out in 15 minutes. Then Kieran turned to Annabelle, and his face softened, but his eyes were still hard as steel. I've got to go. She just nodded, knowing full well how serious this was. Stealing cattle wasn't just about the money. It was a direct threat to the whole ranch's survival. You be careful out there, she said, and you could hear the worry in her voice. He stopped for a second and then did something that surprised the both of them. He reached out and took her hand, giving it a quick, firm squeeze. You lock these doors up tight tonight. I'll send Jacob's wife over to stay with you, just in case we're gone through the night. Annabelle stood on the porch and watched as Kieran and 6 of his best men rode off, with rifles in their saddle scabbards and a look of pure determination set in their shoulders. That important conversation they were about to have, and those other plans he had been talking about, would just have to be put on hold. That long night seemed to stretch on forever. Thankfully, Martha Miller, who was Jacob's wife, came over with her knitting basket in hand and a whole lot of comforting words. But Annabelle just could not find a wink of sleep. Every little noise out in the yard sent her straight to the window, peering into the dark for any sign of the riders coming home. They finally rode in just as the sun came up, looking plumb tired and covered in dust, but they had gotten the job done. Kieran found Annabelle in the kitchen, already making breakfast. We got the cattle back, he told her, taking the hot cup of coffee she handed him. We even caught two of them thieves. The sheriff is taking them on over to the county jail. Are you hurt? She asked, seeing the way he was holding himself so stiff and sore. Nothing a little sleep can't fix, just mighty saddle sore. He finished his coffee in one go and set the cup on the table. I am going to wash up, then hit the hay. Do not you go worrying about any lunch for me. Annabelle just watched him head up those stairs, her face filled with worry for him. Martha was getting ready to head home, now that the men were back safe and sound. She gave Annabelle a knowing look. That man works himself too hard, the older woman said with a little sigh. He always has, even when he was just a boy. This whole ranch, well, it is his entire world. That man doesn't seem to have a minute to spare for anything else, Annabelle had to agree. A little twinkle appeared in Martha's eye. Well, maybe so, but I do declare he seems to find the time for those evening rides these days. Jacob was just telling me he ain't never seen the boss take such a shine to showing somebody around the property. What she was hinting at made a warm blush creep up Annabelle's cheeks. He's just been kind enough to show me the lay of the land, seeing as how I'm new to these parts. Kind? Oh yes, Martha said, gathering up her things. Though I reckon there was something more than plain old kindness driving Kieran Knox when it comes to you, dear. After Martha had gone, Annabelle kept herself busy with chores around the house, trying her best not to get hung up on the older woman's words or on that conversation that got cut short from the night before. What other kind of arrangements had Kieran been fixing to suggest? That question just hung in her mind as she went about her business. Kieran slept clear through till late in the afternoon, finally coming out of his room looking a whole lot better, but still moving with a bit of care. When he started down those stairs, Annabelle saw him flinch just a little. You got yourself hurt, she said, more of an accusation, abandoning the bread dough she'd been working on. It is nothing. One of them rustlers just gotten a lucky punch, is all. He tried to wave off her worry, but she was already right there at his side. Let me have a look, she insisted. With a bit of a sigh, he lifted up his shirt to show a large, ugly bruise spreading right across his ribs on the left side. Annabelle drew in a sharp breath. You should have told me. I have some arnica that would help with a bruise like that. I have had worse, he said, but he let her go ahead and get the salve from her room. In the kitchen, he took a seat at the table while she gently put the ointment on his injured side. That simple act of tending to his wound, feeling the warmth of his skin right under her fingers, created a heavy silence between the two of them. About yesterday, he began, his voice softer than usual. What I was trying to say. The front door suddenly burst wide open, startling them both. Tobias, the young boy from town, was standing in the doorway, breathless and with his eyes wide as saucers. Mr. Knox, there is a big fight at the saloon. The sheriff sent me to come get you. He says there is trouble with the rustler's friends. Kieran was already on his feet, reaching for his gun belt. Tell the sheriff I am on my way. He glanced over at Annabelle, he said, and the frustration in his voice was plain as day. I am mighty sorry. It seems like this conversation is just not meant to happen right now. Then go, she told him, her voice full of a quiet strength. Just be careful with those bruised ribs of yours. He paused right there in the doorway, his eyes locking with hers. This right here is not finished, Annabelle. When I get back, we are going to have a real talk. But it was hours later when he finally came back, and he brought news that pushed all their personal matters to the side once again. The little showdown in town had unfortunately boiled over into something a whole lot more serious. Ugly threats had been made directly against the Knox Ranch, coming from the friends of those captured cattle thieves. Jacob is putting twice the men on the night patrols, Kieran explained as they sat in the quiet ranch kitchen, the old clock on the wall ticking well past midnight. I don't reckon they will actually try anything, but we sure cannot take any chances. How long will all of this go on? Annabelle asked, her gaze fixed on the dark circles that were forming under his tired eyes. Until the trial next week. Once those men are officially sentenced, I figure their friends will likely just move on. He dragged a hand through his hair, a clear sign of how bone-weary he truly was. I am so sorry this is all happening while you are here to visit. Do not apologize. This is your life, protecting this land. It is all yours. She paused for a moment, then added in a soft voice, I have to say, I admire your dedication, Kieran. The hard look on his face seemed to melt away. There was a time when all I ever thought about was making this ranch bigger, always adding more land, more head of cattle. I figured success was measured in acres and the number on a tally sheet. He looked her square in the eye. But lately I have been getting to thinking there might be something more to life than just all that. The meaning behind his words made her heart pick up its pace. Like what? He leaned in a little closer, his gaze never once leaving hers. Like sharing all of this with somebody who truly understands what it is worth. Someone who sees the real beauty of this land, just the same way I do. Before a single word could leave her lips, a gunshot cracked through the quiet night, followed by the sound of men hollering. Kieran was on his feet in a flash, his hand already reaching for the rifle he had propped up against the wall. "You stay inside and lock these doors," he commanded. Every bit of warmth had vanished from his voice, replaced by that hard, cold edge of a man readying himself for whatever trouble was coming. And just like that, he was gone, swallowed up by the darkness. Annabelle hurried over to the window, peering out and trying to make out what in the world was going on. Lanterns were bobbing around in the dark out by the corral, and the faint sound of anxious voices drifted on the night air. The cool night air. More shots rang out, making her flinch with each one. She could not just sit there helpless while Kieran and his men were facing that kind of danger. So she went to get the shotgun she knew was kept in the back of the pantry. Her father had been the one who taught her to shoot. Years ago, always saying that every respectable person should know how to handle a firearm properly. She took her position right by the kitchen window that had a clear view of the yard, and she just watched and waited, ready as she would ever be to defend the house if it came down to it. The whole confrontation lasted for nearly an hour. From what she could piece together, a few men had tried to set a fire out by the barn, but they had been spotted by the night watchman before they could. In the exchange of gunfire that followed, one of the intruders had been wounded, and then the others had run off. When Kieran finally came back inside the house, the look on his face was grim, but he was relieved to see that she was safe. "They are gone. Jacob is taking the wounded man into town for the doctor to take a look at him before he goes to jail." "Was anyone on our side hurt?" she asked, lowering the shotgun. His eyes went a little wide at the sight of that heavy weapon in her hands. "No, ma'am, just some damage to the property." He walked over slowly and gently took the gun from her. Where in the world did you learn to handle one of these?" "My daddy believed in a practical education," she explained. "I am not what you would call a crack shot, but I sure know which end is the business end." A slow smile pulled at the corners of his mouth, even with everything so serious. "You just keep on surprising me, Annabelle Porter." "Is that a good thing?" she asked, her voice suddenly filled with uncertainty. He set the shotgun down gently and took a step closer. So close she could feel the warmth coming right off of him. "It is a very good thing." His voice dropped down to almost a whisper. "I find myself thinking about you at the most inconvenient times. When I am out checking the fence lines or haggling over cattle prices, I start to wonder what you are up to. What is on your mind?" Annabelle felt her breath catch in her throat. "I have been having a similar kind of trouble keeping my focus." His hand rose to gently touch her cheek, the calluses on his palm feeling rough against her soft skin. "I was trying to tell you this yesterday. I do not want you to stay on as my housekeeper." Her heart sank for a moment, right until he continued speaking. "I would like for you to consider becoming my wife." His words just hung there in the quiet air between them, heavy with a meaning that could change everything. Annabelle searched his face, and what she found there was pure, simple honesty in his blue eyes. "But we have only known each other for such a short time," she said, her voice just a whisper. "I knew from the very first day I saw you in Harrington's store, standing there with your chin up, refusing to be broken." His thumb gently traced the line of her jaw. "I knew it when I saw you stitch up Alan's arm without so much as a flinch. I knew it again when I watched you breathe life right back into this old house and make it feel like a home again." "Karen," she breathed, her own heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "I am not asking for an answer right this minute," he said softly. "You still have time left in your 3 months. I want you to use it to be absolutely certain. But I need you to know, when I look at my future now, well, you are in it." Then slowly and with purpose, he lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers, asking a question more than making a demand. Annabelle gave him her answer by leaning in closer, her hands finding their way up to rest on his chest. As the kiss deepened, it became something that spoke of heartfelt promises and new possibilities. When they finally drew apart, both of them had catching his breath. Kieran rested his forehead right against hers. "I reckon I ought to go help the men get this property secured up," he said, not really wanting to leave. "I'll be right here when you get back," she promised him. As he headed back out into the dark night, Annabelle brought her fingers up to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. She had come all the way to Silver Creek, expecting nothing more than an arranged marriage of convenience with some fella she'd never met. Instead, she had found something she never even thought was real. A connection that went down deeper than just what was practical. A feeling that made her heart pound in her chest and made her spirit just take flight. The weeks that followed brought their share of both challenges and clear answers. The trial for those rustlers went on just as planned, and it ended with prison sentences that seemed to put a stop to any more trouble coming after the Knox Ranch. Slowly but surely, life started getting back to normal. Though Kieran, he kept an extra sharp eye out, making sure his property and most of all Annabelle were safe. Their own relationship started to grow, filled with a kind of careful happiness. Kieran made sure to court her the right way, even though they were living together right there under one roof. He would bring her little bouquets of wildflowers he'd picked while making his rounds on the property, and he took her on picnics to all his favorite spots up in the hills. And every evening they would share a good long talk on the porch as the sun dipped low. The whole town started to notice the change in their relationship, especially when they attended Sunday services together, sitting right there side by side in the old Knox family pew, and the whispers followed them right out the door. Most folks were approving. Kieran was a well-respected man, and Annabelle had already proven herself to be a capable and kind-hearted woman during her short time in Silver Creek. A few, however, watched with sour looks on their faces. Chief among them was Gerald Harrington and, of course, his pinch-faced sister. "They're telling everyone I up and stole you away," Kieran mentioned one Sunday as they were driving home from the church service. "Harrington's sister has been whispering to anyone who will stand still and listen that I somehow intercepted his mail-order bride." Annabelle just let out a laugh. The sound of it just danced away on the warm summer breeze. "He turned me down flat before you even made your offer. And besides all that, I was never his to begin with." Kieran's hands tightened up on the leather reins. "No, ma'am, you surely were not." He glanced over at her, his expression turning serious, despite the lighthearted moment of their heart-to-heart talk. "You do not belong to anyone but yourself, Annabelle. That is something I truly admire about you, that independent spirit of yours. And yet, you have asked me to be your wife," she pointed out. "Some folks might say that is just a way of belonging to someone. That is not how I see it at all." He guided the wagon gently around a bend in the road. "Marriage ought to be a partnership, not ownership. My own mother and father taught me that." The pure honesty in his voice touched her deeply. "My own parents had that very kind of marriage. I just never imagined I would find it for myself. Have you?" he asked softly. The question was simple, but it carried a great deal of weight. "Found it?" Annabelle simply looked at him, this strong, honorable man who had offered her a safe place when she needed it most, who had seen her true worth from the very beginning, who kissed her as if she was the most precious thing in the world. "I do believe I have," she said softly. His smile was like the sunrise, transforming his usually serious face. "So does that mean you are accepting my proposal? Does that mean you are truly accepting my proposal?" "It means I am giving it some very serious thought," she teased, though they both knew her answer. But her heart, well, it had already made up its mind. As the hot days of July started giving way to August, Annabelle's 3-month job was drawing to a close. The big question of her future was looming large, though if she was being truly honest, the answer had become as clear as a sunny Texas sky. She belonged right there on the Knox Ranch, and not as a simple housekeeper, but as Kieran's wife and his partner for life. On the evening that marked exactly 3 months since she first stepped foot in Silver Creek, Kieran suggested they take a ride up to the highest point on his property, a flat-topped mesa that looked out over the whole valley. "I've got something I want to show you," he said, giving her a hand up onto the gentle mare he had picked out just for her. They rode along in a comfortable quiet as the sun began its slow descent, painting the landscape in beautiful shades of gold and amber. When they reached the top of the mesa, Kieran helped her dismount, his hands staying for just a moment at her waist. "Look over yonder," he said softly, pointing toward a small grove of trees near a bend in the very creek that gave the town its name. Annabelle squinted her eyes, then she let out a little gasp as she made out a building taking shape right there among the tall cottonwood trees. "Is that a house?" she whispered, and Kieran just smiled. "I've had some fellas out here working on it for the past month. It ain't much right now, just 4 little rooms, but we built it so we can add on whenever we need to." He turned to look her square in the eyes. "It's for us, Annabelle. That is, if you'll have me." Well, her eyes started to brim with tears at the gesture, this real solid proof of how serious he was. His faith in a future for the two of them. Her voice was just a whisper. "You built us a home. I wanted us to have our own fresh start, not have you living in the same old house I was raised in, the very house my own mom and dad shared." He took her hands in his. "I want us to build our own life together right from the foundation up." Annabelle glanced from the little house in the distance back to Kieran's face, seeing all the love and hope just shining there. And right then, every last bit of doubt she had just melted away. She knew deep down this was where she was meant to be, with this man right here in this place. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and simple. "Yes, I will marry you, Kieran Knox." His smile lit up his whole face as he swept her up into his arms, lifting her right off her feet in his excitement. When he finally set her back on her feet, his kiss was gentle but full of passion, a promise of the life they were about to start together. "When?" he asked as soon as they finally pulled apart. "As soon as that house is finished," she said without a second thought. "I want to start our marriage right here in our very own home." He nodded, knowing exactly what she meant by choosing this spot. Just 2 more weeks, and they're putting the roof on tomorrow. As they rode on back to the ranch with the setting sun right at their backs, Annabelle felt a deep-down feeling that everything was right. She had journeyed all the way to Colorado, just hoping for a little security by marrying a man she did not know. But what she found instead was true love, with a man who treasured her for being exactly the person she was. Well, the news of their engagement traveled fast all through Silver Creek. Martha Miller, bless her heart, put together a little get-together with the local ladies to give Annabelle some beautiful quilts and things for her brand new home. The ranch hands, who were usually tough, quiet men, not used to showing their feelings, showed their support by putting in extra hours on the new house, adding some real nice touches like bookshelves built right into the walls and a little garden patch all tilled and ready for planting. Even in town, nearly everyone seemed truly happy for the couple. Gerald Harrington, on the other hand, made a big show of crossing the street to stay clear of them, his bitterness plain to see in the stiff set of his shoulders. "He's just embarrassed, that's all," Jacob explained when Annabelle brought it up. "This town hasn't forgotten how poorly he treated you. It makes him look like a fool that the woman he cast aside is now marrying the best catch in the whole county." Annabelle pushed Gerald completely from her mind, focusing instead on getting everything ready for her wedding and their new home together. They set the date for the first Saturday in September, with a lovely ceremony to take place right there on the porch of their new house, followed by a big old party that would bring the entire community out to celebrate. As the day got closer, Annabelle couldn't help but think about the truly extraordinary turn her life had taken. Just 6 months ago, she had been a heartbroken daughter, facing a future with nothing to her name back in Boston. Now she was about to become the wife of a man she truly loved, the lady of a successful ranch, and a respected member of a community that had welcomed her with open arms. The night before the wedding, as she was packing up the last of her personal things in preparation to move into their new home, Kieran gave a soft knock on her bedroom door. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice gentle, standing politely in the doorway. Annabelle nodded and set down the dress she was folding. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's just perfect," he said, reassuring her as he stepped into the room. He made sure to keep a respectable distance. "I just wanted to give you a little something before tomorrow." Then from his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. "This here belonged to my mother," he explained, opening it up to show a gold band set with a simple diamond with 2 sapphires on either side. "My daddy gave this to her," he went on. "Back when he asked her to come out west with him, she always said those sapphires reminded her of the big sky out in Colorado." Annabelle felt her breath catch in her throat, seeing the beauty of the ring and the sweet story behind it. "Oh, Kieran," she whispered, "it's just beautiful." "I had it sized to fit you," he told her, gently taking the ring from the box. "May I?" She held out her left hand and watched as he carefully slipped the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit, and the gold felt warm against her skin. "Tomorrow I'll put it on your finger again, in front of God and everybody," he said, his voice a little thick with emotion. "But tonight, I wanted this moment to be just for the two of us." Annabelle looked up into his eyes, at this good man who had turned her whole life around in ways she never could have dreamed of. "I love you, Kieran Knox." It was the very first time she had ever said those words out loud, even though they were in her heart for what felt like forever. His blue eyes got deeper with feeling as he pulled her into his arms. "And I love you, Annabelle Porter." His kiss was tender, and it was filled with the promise of tomorrow. "By this time tomorrow, you are going to be Annabelle Knox." "I sure do like the sound of that," she whispered right against his lips. He finally and slowly let her go, knowing it was the proper thing to do for him to leave her room, even though they were about to be married. "I will see you tomorrow at our house, and I will be the one in white," she teased playfully, just after he walked out. Annabelle stood there by the window, looking out at the star-filled land that had truly become her home. Far off in the distance, she could just barely see the outline of their brand new house, just waiting for them to fill it up with a new life and a whole lot of love. The wedding day came up clear and bright, and the September air was crisp with the very first you could feel just a little hint of autumn in the air. Martha and a few of the other ladies were all helping Annabelle get into her dress in the back bedroom of the new house, which they had just finished building only a few days before. Her gown was simple but so elegant, made of a cream-colored silk she had ordered all the way from Denver, with some beautiful lace at the collar and cuffs that Martha had given her from her very own wedding dress. "It is your something borrowed," the older woman had said, her eyes getting a little misty. Through the window, Annabelle could see all the guests arriving. There were ranch hands all cleaned up in their Sunday best, and townspeople arriving in buggies and wagons, and even a few travelers who were staying at the hotel had been invited to come and join the celebration. The whole yard had been turned into something magical, with tables set up right under the big cottonwood trees and lanterns hanging from all the branches in preparation for the party that evening. "It is about time," Martha announced, just as the preacher's buggy pulled on up. "Are you ready, sweet girl?" Annabelle took a nice deep breath, and her hand went to the beautiful ring Kieran had given her only the night before. "I am more ready for this than I have ever been for anything in my whole life." They walked on up to the front of the house where Jacob was waiting to walk her right up onto the porch. The second they rounded the corner, Annabelle's eyes went straight to Kieran, standing there so tall and handsome in a new black suit. His hair was combed perfectly, and his whole face just lit up with love when he saw her. The ceremony itself was short but full of heart, with their vows spoken loud and clear for everyone to hear. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran's kiss was so gentle but tender, knowing everyone was watching, but it showed just how much he adored her. The party went on deep into the evening. There was plenty of dancing to fiddle music, a whole spread of food made by the good women of the community, and toasts all around for the happy couple. As the sun went down, they lit the lanterns, casting a warm, golden light over all the folks gathered there. "Mrs. Knox, are you truly happy?" Kieran asked when they stole a quiet moment away from their guests, standing down by the creek that would forever run past their home. "Completely and truly," she promised, leaning into his arms. "Though I have to say I still can't hardly believe how perfect everything turned out." "Any regrets about not heading back east?" His voice was light, but she could feel the real question underneath it all. Annabelle looked right up at him, this man who had captured her heart so completely out of the blue. "My whole life is right here now, with you." His kiss was deeper this time, not held back by any watching eyes, a husband's kiss for his new wife. When they made their way back to their guests, Jacob gave a knowing wink at Kieran's slightly disheveled appearance. As the evening finally wound down, the last of the guests took their leave with one last round of congratulations, leaving the newlyweds to themselves in their cozy new home. Kieran gently closed the door behind the very last guest, then turned to Annabelle with a warm smile that made her heart flutter. "Finally," he said, his voice soft as he crossed to where she stood near the fireplace, I reckon I've been waiting all day long to have you all to myself." Annabelle felt a warm blush creep up her cheeks, despite her own eager anticipation. It was a truly beautiful wedding. "It surely was," he agreed, reaching up to take the pins from her hair, watching it cascade in waves around her shoulders. "But this, right here, just us. This is what I have been dreaming about since the sun came up. The very second I laid eyes on you in that general store." Well, his confession surely took her by surprise. "Even back then?" "Even back then," he confirmed, his fingers so gentle as they traced the lovely curve of her cheek. "I took one good look at you standing there with your head held so high, even after that fool Harrington turned you away, and something deep down in my soul just knew." "Knew what?" she asked. Her voice was hardly more than a whisper. "That you were meant to be my own." He wrapped his strong arms around her waist, pulling her in close. "Not as some mail-order bride, and not as a housekeeper, but as my wife, my partner, and my whole heart." In the soft, warm glow of the fire, Kieran kissed her with all the love and longing that had grown between them. His touch was gentle but sure as he guided her toward their bedroom, for the true beginning of their wonderful life together. 10 years down the road, Annabelle stood on the porch of their much bigger home, just watching as Kieran taught their 8-year-old son James how to ride his brand new pony. Their sweet 6-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, sat right beside Annabelle, carefully stitching a little sampler with her grandma's favorite saying, "Home is where love grows." The Knox Ranch had done real well over that decade, getting bigger and earning a fine reputation. What they had built together? Annabelle, well, she had brought her own special touches, setting up a small library for the town and getting a school organized that now had 3 good teachers, and she even introduced new ways for breeding livestock that she'd read all about in some of those farming books. And Silver Creek itself had grown right along with them, with the railroad bringing in new folks and all kinds of new opportunities. As for Gerald Harrington, he finally sold his store and moved clear on up to Denver. Just couldn't bear the daily reminder of his own foolish mistake. In his place, a nice young couple was running the store now. Real friendly people, true partners in helping the whole community grow. "Mama, look!" Elizabeth called out as little James managed to guide his pony round in a perfect little circle, with Kieran's hand hovering protectively right there beside him. "That's my boy." "James," Annabelle called out, her heart just about bursting with pride and love. Kieran looked up then, catching her eye from all the way across the yard. Even after 10 whole years of marriage, that one simple look still sent a gentle warmth all the way through her. He gave her that very same smile that had first given her hope on the day she first arrived. Silver Creek is a woman who was at the end of her rope, with nowhere else in the world to go. As the afternoon sun washed over the ranch in a golden light, Annabelle thought back on the incredible journey that had brought her to this very spot. She had come west looking for safety, but she had found so much more. A true love, a real purpose, a family and a whole community. The mail-order bride, who never even made it to the man she was supposed to marry, had instead found her real home. Later on that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon after the children were all tucked into bed, Kieran took her hand, his thumb gently brushing over the wedding band he had slipped on her finger a full 10 years ago. "Any regrets, Mrs. Knox?" he asked softly, his voice an echo of the question he asked on their wedding night. Annabelle leaned her head right against his shoulder, a deep sense of peace filling up her heart. "Not a single one." His arm tightened around her. "My only one is that I did not find you sooner." "We found each other exactly when we were meant to," she said with the kind of wisdom that only comes from the years they had shared. As the twilight finally settled into night, they stayed right there on the porch together, just watching as the stars began to pop out over the land they both loved so dearly. Annabelle Porter Knox, a woman who was once headed for a cold and calculated marriage, had instead found a true love story, one more beautiful than any she had ever dared to imagine. It was the kind of story not written in the pages of her favorite books, but in the real life she and Kieran had built from the ground up, together in this bold and wonderful country.